Well, victims of crime now have new resources for recovery and getting through the court system, as Rosalind Anderson reports. A two-day summit aimed at community-based safety solutions is now underway in the capital city.
The Scaling Safety Summit Advance a Blueprint for a Safer Jackson is providing funding to established community organizations to help crime victims heal while preventing violence.
We see the investment in law enforcement, we see the investment in jails and prisons, and we don't see the investment in community.
Day one of the Scaling Safety Summit focused on crime victims, asking what they need to recover and reclaim their lives and communities. Families of violent crime filled the session, meeting with victim service providers to find available resources for mental health, court navigation, and financial recovery.
Everything about my life has changed since I received that phone call.
Felicia Marshall started Grant Me Justice in 2017 when her daughter Alexia Buckhalter was murdered in Jackson.
All of the things that we've seen with our eyes, we can't erase. And so I knew that I was a part of something bigger than I had imagined. There would be more than just telling stories. It would be providing resources to families that have been impacted by homicide.
Marshall's organization provides counseling, financial assistance, and other resources for violent crime victims. Jackson is one of 5 cities chosen by Scaling Safety to invest in community-based public safety solutions.
With the right investment, we think that Jackson can become a national standout for what it looks like to bring neighborhood leaders together with public safety officials and create a more balanced approach to public safety, and one that's really rooted in resident empowerment.
Scaling Safety provides grants to community-based organizations with the goal of reducing crime 50% in 5 years. Day 2 of the summit continues tomorrow. Rosalind Anderson, 3 on Your Side.